Hi. I don't have a remote control for my stand yet, so you'll be seeing close-ups sometimes. This is my first video. I'm going to see how it goes before I decide how many I'm going to do. My name's Patty Parker. I'm a retired home ec teacher. Later in my career, we changed the name to Family and Consumer Sciences, which caused a lot of people to think that home ec is no longer in the high schools. But if your school has FACS classes, we called it FACS for Family and Consumer Science. Now I think they've shortened it even further to FCS. So your kids can take those classes. You don't just learn to cook in those classes. It's lots more. I think back in the day when I was still teaching, we taught 11 course offerings in a 3-year rotation. It included child development, family living, health, nutrition, interior design, beginning cooking, world foods, personal finances, all kinds of things. So those classes mostly are still available for your children, and I'd like to put a plug in for FACS classes. Anyway, why did I decide to do this? I asked myself that this morning when I was getting ready. Like I said, people keep asking me for recipes. They call old students and say, hey, do you have the recipe for something? And I usually can find it. And I never really got teaching out of my system. I enjoyed my career so much. I loved it. And it just seemed like a fun thing maybe to do in my retirement. So we'll see how it goes and see if I continue it or not. Today, I'm going to start with my Mama Jewel's pie crust. My mother was a country lady. She learned to cook from her mother, of course, and very seldom used recipes for things like this. She did not use pie crust recipes. She used filling recipes, but not pie crust recipes. And I'll give you some of her filling recipes as well. When I taught in Kansas, one day my assistant principal brought pies to school to put in the teacher's lounge. His name was Ryan Wiebe. And it was the first time I'd tasted crust that tasted exactly like mine. And I didn't have a recipe, and so when people would ask me for my recipe, I honestly couldn't give it to them. So here's his recipe. You can Photoshop it if you want to. Not Photoshop it, what's it called? Click it, save it, you know. It calls for, it's 3 cups of flour, a cup and a half of butter-flavored Crisco, 1.5 teaspoons of salt, and then 6 to 8 tablespoons of ice-cold water. So if you want to screenshot that, so you'll have it to use, that is just exactly like my pie crust. I'm not going to use that recipe today though, because I'm not used to measuring for that. So I'm just going to show you what it should look like, and that will help you too. This is my mom and dad, Herschel and Jill Stark. This is my mom in her kitchen when I was a kid. Here's the story of the importance of pie crust in my family. When I got married very young at 18, my husband Jack was 20 when we got married. My mom really was a wonderful cook, but had not taught me anything about cooking. And she called me into the kitchen one day and she said, come in here, I want to teach you how to make pie crust. And I thought, okay, pie crust, you know. She made wonderful pie crust, but I hadn't asked for this. And this is the story she told me. She said, when your dad and I got married, this is what he said to me. He had background, he had 7 siblings. And he said his mother would make 1 pie for dinner and cut it in 9 pieces, mom, dad, and 7 siblings. And he would get just a tiny little sliver of pie. And so he told mom when they got married, all I ask of you, Jewel, is that I have all the pie that I can eat. And so my mother set out to make pies and keep pies in the house all the time. I seldom remember a time there wasn't at least a piece of a pie in our kitchen. She made all kinds of other good things too. But So that's why she thought it was important that I learned to make pie crust. It seemed to work for them because they were married 62 years before my mother passed away. So anyway, I'm going to show you how to make Mama Jewel pie crust. She always had this is her spoon. It was a OUS military tablespoon, real deep. You can use anything, and you're going to be probably using the recipe I gave you. So, but the way she told me to do it is for one pie crust. She said heap up all the Crisco you can get on one spoon. I have no idea how much that is. I guess I could measure it, but I never have. So that was how much Crisco to use. Then she said use just a little salt, and she poured it out in the palm of her hand like that. So I do what she did, pour it out in the palm of my hand. And then she said just enough flour, here it comes, to make it look right. That's what she always said, just make it look right. Well, you know, to an 18-year-old kid, what does that mean? Make it look right. So anyway, you need a pastry blender. And if you don't have one, you can use a fork, but I recommend if you're a serious pie maker, you need a pastry blender. So you just start working that flour into that Crisco and just keep moving it around. At this point in time, you can play with this for days and it will not make your pie crust tough. But I will say, if you mess with it too much after we put the water in it, pretty soon it will make it tough. So I'll tell you when to stop playing with it. Mom used to say that the only three things that you could ruin a pie crust is by over mixing it after you put the ice water in it, or not using cold enough water. Use ice cold water, and I have mine sitting here literally with ice in it. And the last thing is, and I'll show you this when we're rolling it out, is not to ever stretch it as you roll it. Now that I have been to college and taken courses in cooking, I realize Mom knew more about cooking than she knew because it's you're trying to avoid making gluten. Gluten is what forms when flour and water is mixed together too much, and it literally will get stretchy to where you can stretch it like a rubber band. And so what we're trying to avoid is making this stretchy or glutinous. So you have to be careful and not overmix it later on. Right now, it really doesn't matter. And I'm going to say that that's about what it's supposed to look like. It's just crumbly, like a crumb mixture that you would put on top of maybe your apple pie or something like that. All right. So then I just make a little spot in the middle of my bowl, just a little well, and then I start very slowly pouring some ice water in it. You don't want the ice in it, just the water. And it really doesn't take much. And the less water you can put in it, the more flaky the crust will be. Too much water will make it stick together too much, and then it won't be flaky. Okay, see how it's still crumbly around the outside edges? I'm going to drizzle just a little bit more water. And I'm not stirring, I'm just kind of tossing it around and mashing it. You mash more than you do anything. What I'm trying to get is just to where it's sticking together and there's not a lot of crumblies in it. See how it's beginning to stick together? Just a drizzle more. And like that recipe says, that's about 6 to 8 tablespoons of ice cold water. Now let me show you. It doesn't look like pie crust yet, but if I take my hands and gently, I don't want to knead it like you do bread, But if I just gently kind of mash it together, I can make it form a ball if I have enough water. And if you don't have enough water, if it won't stick together like a ball, just drizzle a little bit more water on top of it. It's not that big of a deal. And you can do that with Ryan's recipe. Okay, see how I have a ball? And for an 8-inch pie, you need a little bit smaller than a softball. Okay. Now I just put some flour, quite a bit of flour actually, on my pastry sheet. This is another good thing to have. If you have smooth countertops, you can do it right on your countertop. It's just messy to clean up. But if you don't have a smooth countertop, if you have like a tile countertop, you need to use a pastry sheet, because otherwise when you roll it out, you'll have little indentations in it. Anyway, so I'm going to just kind of mash this into a disc. And as I'm doing it, I'm just kind of turning it over in the flour. I'm not kneading it. I'm not stretching it. I'm just patting it. Mom used to say, treat it like it's a baby. Just give it little love pats. And I use more flour than some people do, mainly because I don't want it to stick to my sheet, because then it's sometimes kind of hard to get off the sheet. So, and see how it kind of starts cracking sometimes? Just kind of fix those cracks. It doesn't hurt, but it just kind of fix those cracks. I am not pushing down and pushing hard. I'm just letting the weight of my rolling pin do the pressing, and press just gently. My dad made this rolling pin for me. It's made out of walnut from the plantation home that his ancestors lived on in Kentucky. So it's kind of dear to me. He was quite a woodworker, my dad. I'm just starting in the middle and rolling out toward the outside. And what I'm trying to do is just get it uniformly the same thickness. And I don't like my pie crust real thick. Some people make pie crust too thick for my taste. I know that you all have tasted fabulous pie crust, and you probably have tasted, like I have, some not so fabulous pie crust. Everybody tends to like pie crust like their moms made it. I knew a man one time that didn't like my pie crust because he was used to his mother making pie crust in a little greasy spoon cafe, and it was more like tough. We'd go to a truck stoppers and he'd say, "That's good pie crust." Not to me. Anyway, so I've got this, I don't even know how thick to tell you. Just not, if you do the baseball size and get it out to the 9-inch circle on your pastry sheet, it'll be just right. I also have, let me find it. Where'd it go? Oh, here it is, right in front of me. I also have this little gizmo. It was Tupperware, it looks like a J. I don't know if they still have them or not, but they're really handy little things for lots of things. Like if you're chopping up vegetables, you can scoop them up and put them in whatever. So I just lay my rolling pin up at the top and just kind of get that underneath it and pull it up. And if I see that it's starting to stick somewhere, this one isn't. But if it's starting to stick somewhere, then I just use this to kind of get it loose. There it did, just a little on that spot. And then I just use the edge of it to kind of clean that off a little bit. And I put my pie plate down. And then I just roll this out on top of the pie plate. And as you can see, I made this one generously big. It probably didn't need to be quite that large for an 8-inch. I normally nowadays make 9 and 10-inch pies. Then it looks, I hope you can see it. If you get a little hole in it, just patch it. See how it's hanging down on the sides? Well, then I trim it out just a little ways but from the edge, because I like to have a little ring of crust around the top of the pie. Maybe a little more than some people do. I'll show you when I get it finished here in a little bit. Just trim the edge off. And that crust, by the way, that's left can be re-rolled or just put on a pie plate like this and sprinkle a little cinnamon and sugar on it, and your kids will love it. Anyway, so then I just take the crust, I lift up the edge, and I just kind of roll it under and give it a little pinch. And I do that all the way around it. And I'm letting it stay just a little bit above the rim of the pan. And I'll show you why in a minute, because I like to foo-foo it up a little bit. And the good thing about it being a little bit higher, besides it gives you a little room to get creative and make it a little bit prettier, is the fact that it keeps the pie from boiling over in your oven if you make meringue or something for it, or if you're making a pie that you bake. Anyway, for a trim on it, Mom taught me to use my 2 fingers and my thumbs, and I push forward with one and back with the other, forward with one and back with the other. And I'll show you what it looks like when I get it done. It's not fancy, but like I said, it helps keep the filling in. Now, if I was making a fruit pie, and I was going to do, and I'm going to show you how to make an apple pie. If I was going to do that, I wouldn't be crimping this right now. I would wait till I got the filling in it, and then I would lay the top crust on it, and then I would trim them together, and then I would crimp them together. But this is what it looks like when you get done. Not beautiful, but it works. Then you need to get a fork. And just if you're making a cream pie, that you need a pre-cooked crust, and I'm just going to poke holes all over the bottom of that crust with my fork. And this keeps it from popping up. In college, they taught us a method. I never liked using it. It was you put a little ring of wax paper or parchment paper down, and then put dry beans in the bottom and bake it. It just seemed like an awful lot of fuss for something that some little holes in the bottom did just as well. So anyway, that's how you do it. You put it in a 400-degree oven for about 15 to 20 minutes. You need to check it, and when it gets brown, you take it out. And I pre-baked one so I could show you what to do with it. This is what they'll look like when you take them out of the oven. And I like mine kind of light brown, but some people like them darker than that. Okay, it's as easy as that. And if you didn't get the recipe, I'll hold it up one more time, and you can take a screenshot of it. And thank you, Ryan Weeby, for giving me that recipe. I'm going to make this short because it's already 18 minutes long, and the next video will be how to make a cream pie filling to put in this crust. See you later.